Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. Usually I talk about studio albums, original pieces of work all recorded together by one artist. But I came across this cool little collection the other day at the library that I've been listening to a lot called A Solitary Man, the Early Songs of Neil Diamond. So it's kind of well known that Neil Diamond started out his career not necessarily recording his own work, but doing songwriting for other performers. Nonetheless, because Neil Diamond would go on to become such a megastar in his own right, I feel like that part of his story is often forgotten. And even as a pretty big Neil Diamond fan, I discovered a lot of new stuff when listening to this collection. I mean, one can certainly think of examples of Neil Diamond songs that have been recorded by other musicians. The Elvis version of Sweet Caroline is great. There's the very famous version of Red Red Wine by UB40, I'm a Believer by the Monkees, and later by Smash Mouth, Urge Overkill's version of Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon that shows up in Pulp Fiction, and so on and so on. But amongst these songs, there were also a whole bunch of songs that Neil wrote that he never recorded, at least not for the general public. And therefore, this collection is a fascinating look into the early musical career of Neil Diamond, what he actually was as a songwriter. One of the very best songs on this collection is the very first one. It's called Look Out, Here Comes Tomorrow. This is recorded by the Monkees, who of course recorded several Neil Diamond compositions, but this is the Monkees song we get to see here. And, on top of just being a catchy little tune, it manages to show how you can be a kind of clever, creative songwriter, even while writing safe, bubblegum pop material. And it actually stood out to me as someone who was listening to some of Neil Diamond's late 60s solo records, how different his songwriting style was in those very early years than it was later. I feel like once Neil was recording his own compositions, he relied more on his emotions to make the songs great. Whereas when he was writing for other people, he was forced to think a little more about the words. And basically, what's clever about Look Out, Here Comes Tomorrow is, on the one hand, it is this very simple subject matter. It's about this boy who's in love with two different girls and saying, what do I do? They're both so pretty. But by coming up with this abstract way to phrase the chorus, this sort of fear for the future, look out, here comes tomorrow, a phrase that could have lots of meanings to lots of different people, he takes this sort of simple, teeny bop problem and makes it into something bigger. He gives it its full emotional weight. Track number 2 is one that Neil did record, though I wouldn't say it's one of his famous songs. It's called The Boat That I Rowed. This is a song that's made interesting by its uniquely worded chorus. The boat that I rowed don't cross no ocean. The boat that I rowed won't get me there soon. And Neil's version, again, is great because he has this natural awkwardness to his voice. This version is recorded by a Scottish singer named Lulu. And while the music is fairly similar to Neil's version, Lulu has just a real dynamic spark in her voice. She also has a great version of David Bowie's Watch That Man. So this is another highlight on the collection. Track number 3 is Red Red Wine, but it is not the famous UB40 version. This is the reggae version from years earlier by a guy called Tony Tribe. And actually, when UB40 discovered the song, it was through Tony Tribe. And they saw it was written by a guy named Diamond, but they didn't even know it was a Neil Diamond song when they recorded it. So they accidentally got Neil one of his biggest hits. This original version, it doesn't quite work for me. It has a rhythm that I guess is more unique to the reggae genre than some of the more crossover reggae music. So I don't know, make up your mind about the sound. Next, we get Kentucky Woman by Deep Purple. It's a much more rocked up version than Neil's original and has a long psychedelic organ solo. I kind of prefer Neil Diamond's version, to be honest, but this one has its good points too. We get another really great one with track number 5 called Just Another Guy. This is a song that, according to the liner notes, Neil Diamond probably wrote it for the doo-wop singer Dion DiMucci. And when you listen to the initial chords on this song, that kind of makes sense. It has a very similar sound to Dion's The Wanderer. But it ends up sounding to me a lot more like a Roy Orbison song, both in terms of the sort of musical shape of the song. Roy Orbison was known for unconventional songwriting, but also because Cliff Richard's voice, it has a natural vulnerability to it. It almost comes across like a shy puppy. He doesn't have the cockiness of a Dion. And this makes Cliff Richard a really good fit for Neil Diamond because, as I've said, Neil Diamond's angst was such an important part of his success. And Cliff Richard clearly saw the two of them as a pair because I think he recorded 5 Neil Diamond songs over the course of his career. Cliff Richard is one of these guys who I think he's like an A-list rock and roll legend in the UK, but wasn't, or at least isn't really famous here in North America. So it was interesting to get to hear a bit of him on this collection. Another one of my absolute favorites here, perhaps my absolute favorite, is Sunday and Me by Jay and the Americans. As with the last song, there's something very Roy Orbison about the performance. It's hard to tell if any of that credit goes to Neil Diamond or it's just the singers. Roy Orbison was a big hero of Neil Diamond. But anyway, this is recorded by a group called Jay and the Americans. Their lead singer's real name was David Blatt. He changed Blatt to Black in the way, many Jewish entertainers changed their name at this time and earlier. And he changed his first name from David to Jay because the band Jay and the Americans already existed. They previously had another lead singer named Jay, and he figured, well, if I'm going to be the lead singer for Jay and the Americans, I better be a Jay. So as for the Neil Diamond composition itself, it's kind of a similar deal to Look Out, Here Comes Tomorrow, in that the sort of meaning of the repeated chorus phrase is potentially different than the content of the song. The song sounds very much like a love song being obsessed with a girl, yet the chorus implies being obsessed with the Weeknd, being in a relationship with the Weeknd. And obviously this has a lot of potential meaning. What really makes this great, I'd never heard Jay and the Americans before, and David Blatt / Jay Black has an amazing voice. Next, we get a song called It Comes and Goes. This is recorded by an artist named Sedina, but she was also known as Priscilla Mitchell. Apparently, she recorded country songs under the Priscilla Mitchell name and recorded poppier songs under the Sedina name. Weirdly, I think Sedina was the name of her daughter. So who knows what's going on with that. But I don't know. This wasn't a favorite song of mine, but again, it's a kind of interesting example of Neil Diamond's songwriting. At some points, you have some very long phrases that nonetheless manage to be rhythmic. This is one of Neil's strengths. We also see it in Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon. And just examples of sort of lines that sound very similar but different paired together. It sort of shows the art of simple but effective songwriting. Next, we get a doo-wop-y song called The New Boy in Town, a very giddy performance from an artist named Jan Tansey. The dum-diddy-doo-dum-dum at the beginning sounds pretty much exactly like Neil Sedaka's Breaking Up Is Hard to Do. But I guess that's the thing with doo-wop songs. They kind of try to sound the same. The next track is another favorite of mine. It's called My Babe, recorded by a singer named Ronnie Dove. Neil Diamond is the producer on this one, and you hear lots of the hallmarks of early Neil Diamond songs. You hear horns, you hear hand claps, you have nice little piano riffs, and Ronnie Dove's voice is just nice and expressive. Not much to say about the lyrics in the song, other than, like in track 5, the singer sings, "I'm just an ordinary guy." So I guess this was a recurring motif in Neil's songwriting. We then get a wistful 50s ballad with some country choices and how the piano and backup singing sounds by a guy named Jimmy Clanton. We got a song called We Got Love by a group called the Rockefellers, which I think were a Filipino family band, and they have like a child lead singer who sounds like, I guess, young Michael Jackson would go on to sound. Neil Diamond apparently also wrote a Christmas song for them called Santa Santa. Next, we get a song called Bobby Did, recorded by Marcy Blaine. In order to make sense of this one, I had to look it up and I couldn't find the lyrics anywhere. But what I did find is Marcy Blaine had an earlier recording that was more famous called Bobby's Girl. And this is the sequel to that one. And I guess the first song is about how she's so obsessed with Bobby. And this one, I guess, it's kind of interesting. The singer is broken up with Bobby and everyone is congratulating her because they're like, "Well done, girlfriend. You got away from that bad man." But her dark secret is, no, I still love Bobby. He just broke my heart. The next song is called Where Did You Run? It's recorded by a singer named Billy Fury, who was kind of an Elvis-like figure in the UK, apparently. And it's co-written with Neil's wife at the time, Jay Posner. As far as I can tell, she's not a particularly public person, so I don't know if she did much else in the way of songwriting or this collaboration just happened. But yeah, it's a great song. Neil has a couple early compositions where they sound really dramatic, even though they're sort of about ordinary day-to-day life subject matter. And again, as I said with Sunday and Me, you have this great contrast between potentially ordinary subject matter of talking about a relationship, but using these grander abstract phrases of, where did you run to describe it. Next, we get a song called Fool That I Am. This is by a New York doo-wop group called the Solitaires. And on the one hand, it sounds like classic doo-wop, like songs like Only You and This Magic Moment, but the vocals are so over the top and raspy. It must have sounded incredible to hear your song recorded by this group, as Neil got to. So after this, we see a bunch of songs that Neil Diamond actually did record, but these were covers they did. And they're also sort of from after his songwriter era and into the phase where he is truly an established star in himself. Nonetheless, the very first of these songs is great. We have a very thoughtful vocal performance by Arthur Alexander on Glory Road. I keep accidentally running into Arthur Alexander as I record stuff for this channel. He was someone who both covered a lot of people's material and wrote a lot of material and was really looked up to within the music world, but not enough for him to have been a success. And this is a guy who retired from music and had an ordinary job. So I think he's like someone who got to be famous without being rich and sort of went in and out of obscurity. One of these days, I have to find some music of Arthur Alexander's. I think the challenge with a song like Glory Road is it's a song that really needs Neil's angsty delivery because it's kind of short and to the point. And Arthur Alexander doesn't quite have the same angst, but the song still sounds good, and his voice is just so smooth, and he sounds like he's being very thoughtful, as I said, when he's performing it. So I like it. So after this, we get covers of Neil's songs, Love to Love, You'll Forget, Ain't No Way. These artists, I don't know any of them. Billy Davis, The Wanderer's Rest, The Box Tops. Then we get BJ Thomas, famous for Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, doing a version of Neil's Solitary Man. We have the Four Tops doing I'm a Believer. This is a song that's obviously been covered by plenty of people, but it's interesting in contrast to the Monkees or even to Neil's version because the lead singer, I guess it's Levi Stubbs, he has a very low voice, and when one thinks of the Monkees singing this, one thinks of a high voice. We get a singer named Jackie Edwards singing Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon. We get a very weird, slowed down version of Cherry Cherry with flutes. I mean, it's interesting, but the point of Cherry Cherry is it's just supposed to be a fast, fun little guitar groove. We have Junior Walker and the All Stars performing Holly Holy, Neil's sort of pseudo gospel song. And finally, we get a really fun performance of Sweet Caroline by Bobby Womack and Peace. Bobby Womack, fairly big name. It's one I hear a lot, but I'm not sure I could tell you any of his songs. So that's another one I'm going to be on the lookout. He doesn't mess with the formula of Sweet Caroline too much, but he is one of these voices that's simultaneously gravelly and beautiful. It kind of reminded me of James Brown. It's a very epic way to end this collection. So overall, if you can find this CD, I would very much recommend it because I discovered so much good stuff on here. Look Out, Here Comes Tomorrow, Lulu's version of The Boat That I Rode, Just Another Guy, Sunday and Me, My Babe, Fool That I Am. Really sheds a light on a part of Neil Diamond's career that has remained in relative obscurity. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.